So no shit, there I was, up to my armpits in hand grenade pins and ammo links, with nothing left but my P38. That's something that one of my former captains used to tell me whenever I first interviewed for a job over at Division, and it was an icebreaker. Hey guys, this is Rick the Ooge, here to talk to you about something that I just posted, and something that it was a question that I've asked before and I never thought about doing a video on. The question is this, and I'll post it up here. What's stopping it from engraving through the opposite side of the glass? Now, as y'all know, I just did a glass, and I did it what we call flat. Basically, instead of it being on a rotary, and I'm using this tumbler as an example, where a rotary will go like this as it's engraving. It's staying flat, so it's able to go like this and work like I'm doing a flat piece of work. So what was making it not, as I call it, ghosting on the other side? Well, there's this little thing called a focal point. Now, every lens, regardless of manufacturer, what have you, they have focal points. Now, these are the general lenses that I use. This is part of my 4-inch lens. And this right here, from about right here down to about right there, let me show you. This is kind of a guesstimation, but it'll be about right up in this time frame. And this little distance right here below this cone is where the focal point is. Now, the lens is way up here, and so it has what is called a 4-inch focal point. So does that mean it automatically stops at 4 inches? No, it doesn't. In fact, a 4-inch lens, which is what I used on that piece of glass, it's mostly designed for curves because it can handle a little bit here and there. But it's one of those things of, what do we do? Now, there's all sorts of other lenses, like this is my 2.5-inch lens minus the cone. It won't work on this because they're two different models. And that's your general purpose type of lens. Now, it will do all sorts of fun stuff. Primarily, yes, I do it on tumblers. I can use it on glass. Taking off the cone, and I'll show you this little nib right here. That right there, that is your air assist. That keeps all the smoke and other debris away from your lens. So whenever I've got this plugged in, this little nib plugged in, it will blow away everything and keep that area clear. Plus, it actually helps whenever you're cutting stuff. So if you're cutting, I don't know, different plastics or what have you, keep it from flaming up. So it's a dual purpose type of thing. Can you run it just, and even my 4-inch has this little nib right there. So yes, you can run it without that little nib. And it's just one of those things of, when you're doing this type of stuff, you're helping yourself do a process. Now, this air assist nozzle right here will also help with your engravings and a bunch of other things. It's not magic, but it is. Air does, when you're forcing air down, and if you, let's see if I can get this up in here. You know, you got all that right there. That will, that's where your voodoo magic comes through. That's where all that the magic comes through. But every one of my lenses has something that looks like this. And that's your focal stick. This is a 1.5 inch for my AP laser. And this is a 4-inch focal stick for my from my USP lenses. Now, there are different lenses out on the market. Every manufacturer has their own specific type of deals. A lot of the lenses out there, even though the body or this throat is different and how it mounts, and let me pull this one off. And you can see there's a lens right there, and there's a lock ring in there. And it'll hold it in place. You take it out, you clean it. That's one of the things that you have to do with your lenses. Now, with the 4-inch lens and the whiskey glasses that I didn't have any real ghosting on the other side. It didn't go past that area. Now, one thing about glassware, and it's something that I have found through owning AP, and you know, even the owner says, the cheaper the glass, the better it engraves. So let's use for an example, you go to Dollar Tree, Dollar General, one of these, you know, very cheap places to buy glassware. Buy the cheapest glass you can buy. You know, even if you buy it online, as long as it's not leaded. For some reason, CO2 lenses don't like leaded glass or crystal. It does something funky, and it won't engrave. So, but one of the things that you have to, as a laser engraver, have to understand, you know, you want to make money. You want to create memories. Now, after I engrave, there's, you know, there's different things out there to help you engrave on glass. Now, me, I go bare. That means I don't use some of the techniques. There's an actual orange lamp sheet that you put on there to make the things look dark. I've heard people use Dawn. I've heard people use paper towel and water. There's different spray. There's a spray out there that I've used before, and it works very well. But I go eau de naturel. I want that frosted appearance. So, you know, whenever you're looking at engraving glass, that's what you have to contend with. Now, that's with a CO2 laser. Now there's another laser called a UV, and that's a galvo style laser. And when it comes down to engraving glass, in my opinion, that's the gold standard. So to be able to do that, to be able to go and do all these fun things, it's one of those things of it's not as quick. It will cut a perfect circle in glass if you let it. But instead of doing like with the CO2 where it microfractures, and for cleanup on those, I use a microfiber towel that gets rid of all the microfracture shards on there. With a UV laser, and this, going back to that question, is where ghosting, engraving on the other side potentially will happen. And so, that's something that you definitely would be concerned about, and you'd have to, I think there is a procedure. I don't know. Like I said, I don't own a UV laser. I want one. And if I get a bunch of likes and, subscribers, I may be able to get one. But until that time, I've got to look at other people's laser engraving machines, especially the UV and Drool. But when it comes down to CO2, which is primarily what I use for engraving glass, I have used my fiber to do that as well. But it's one of those things of, you've got to use what you got. And now the reason why I took off this cone off of my 4-inch lens, because generally I do run it like this with a cone. I don't know the reasons, but I cannot, if I were to use a 4-inch lens with this cone, the laser hits up on one of the outer walls. It doesn't come through that little opening right there. It will hit off to the side. So I cheated the system. And I was working on something large. It was a barrel head. And realistically, with a 4-inch lens, you want to use that for something that is not perfectly flat. Pull this over here. That is deemed perfectly flat, even though there's probably a curve in there. But I can engrave on that and not have any heartburn whatsoever. I would get away with using my 1.5-inch lens, where I could get, now this is primarily for a lot of detail, but I could get away with doing that with my 2.5-inch lens or 2-inch lens, whatever the case may be. That's such a minute difference. You can almost call it either one. But it's all in what you do. Now, with the curvature of that glass, and even when you're looking at it this way, and you can see kind of, it's not exactly flat, but it has that curve. Well, you want to be able to engrave and get an even engraving. This is where a lot of either practice, know-how, combination of all the above is what you can actually get away with. Could I have done it with, say, my 2-inch lens? Sure, I would argue that. But why risk it? Now, every laser, when you're dealing with tumblers, when you're dealing with, say, glassware, and you're doing flat, it is one of those things of, do I have the right, can I get it done properly? Now, when you're talking about like glassware, there's things that you have to worry about. I do have a rotary device that, will spin it. It'll change the angle so everything's even. But the problem becomes, When you look at some of them, they're squared at the bottom. And until and I cannot do 3D print a jig to hold it and make the outside round while maintaining a the squareness, whether it's a hexagon, an actual square, pentagon, whatever. So doing it flat for that type of glassware was the only option for me. So that's what I did. I went with my 4-inch lens, went about middle of where my engraving area was, and went to work. And it came out beautifully. The customer was happy, I was happy, and that's just one of the things. So, bottom line, you have to adjust fire whenever you're, with whatever you're doing. Now, I've done used my 4-inch lens on a Jack Daniels barrel, which I do have a video on, and that came out great. But it's not like with some galvo lasers, whether it's CO2, fiber, or even UV. They have a 3D feature in which the head will go up and down inside your actual head where the mirror is. So it doesn't have that feature. These gantry style CO2s do not have that feature. So you have to cheat the system a little bit. Sometimes you would have to, pretending like this is the barrel, you would have to come down just a little bit off to the side to be able to get everything there. And sometimes you'll have to go do multiple passes to get the engraving. You may have to go up on it so you're not there's a whole bunch of cheating that you have to do. But it was a long explanation as to why I use the 4-inch lens, what prevents shadows on the other side, or even down on the bottom, on this piece of it down here. Now, if I've got my focal point right here, right in this area, it won't reach down here. Once it hits the glass, it will diffuse and spread out. Now, could there be little spots down below? Sure. There's a plausibility, but it's not guaranteed. It's just one of those things of being able to do this and having, being able to cheat the system. But it was a great question, and I think that this should answer everything, and I'm glad that AC Asimocole and I apologize for butchering the way that your deal put up on there. It's just one of those things, it was an excellent question. I had to address it. And I think that, I've only been doing this for about going on 6 years now. And even though not doing it as a business, I'm currently doing it as a hobby while I recover. I think that was an excellent question. And I think that a lot of people don't understand the voodoo magic that even those of us in the industry learn or figure out. This isn't something that you go to a trade school about laser engraving. Although I did go to a school to learn about my fiber. But with the CO2 gantry style laser, it's hard to do. Now, one of the things that most people don't understand is everything is subjective. A lot of it is trial and error. And, figuring out how to make something that looks like a football that's supposed to be a circle, you know, you got to practice. So I decided I would practice and you do the 4-inch lens, and you all saw how it looked, and I was pleasantly pleased with it. And now I get to add that to my little arsenal of stuff that I get to do. So again, this is Rick the Ooge. I want to thank him for the question. It was an excellent question, or her. I think that was one of those things that I haven't been taught properly, and you know, it's stuff that you figure out. There's a lot of testing that a laser engraver goes through, and it's, you know, whether they're doing the gantry style laser, whether they're doing a galvo style laser, we all learn, and the industry is starting to get away with holding all their secrets in tight without a lot of money flying their way. A lot of the manufacturers, even whenever I bought this laser, they have a guideline. It says this is a good starting point for you. Every one of these lasers, these CO2 lasers, the gantry style, they could be one number off on everything, but everything's going to be different. So you're given a starting point. It's up to you to dial in. Okay, this is going to be X speed, X power, whatever. You know, even that X speed and X power may be different for certain colors. Like orange and pinks for me are, I have to pump up the power just a few percentage points in order to get down to the metal because of the thickness of the coatings of the brand I was using. So it boils down to a lot of different things. Now it's time to figure out some other stuff and get excellent questions from y'all. Again, this was an excellent question, and I'm happy to, hopefully I answered it properly. If not, put it down in the comments. Give me a like, follow, subscribe, and you know, we can all learn together. This is Rick the Ooge, and I hope you all have a great day.